Good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Hamilton. I am the director of Suitcase Stories at the International Institute of New England. Suitcase Stories is a program we launched a few years ago to raise the profile of refugee and immigrant stories and also try to build community wherever we are, but particularly through the art of storytelling. The Suitcase Stories is one of the many programs that the International Institute of New England leads. We are a 102-year-old organization. We support people with refugee resettlement, education, employment, legal services, and then with Suitcase, we amplify the voices of people like Sarah's, who's our guest today. Since we launched the program a few years ago, we've had over 200 people from 75 countries tell a story, both US and foreign born, because we believe that everybody is touched by migration. I met our guest today, Sarah Sharpe, at Brandeis University when we brought Suitcase Stories to the college there. And I'm going to let Sarah introduce herself and give you a little bit about her background.
Sure. So as you mentioned, my name is Sarah, and I recently graduated from Brandeis University. I majored in international relations and sociology, and I minored in conflict analysis. So the core of that is just people. I wanted to learn everything and anything about people, how to work with them, cultures, perspectives, and how to balance it all together. So I graduated from there, and now being postgraduate, I recently got accepted to Northeastern University, where I will be getting my master's in public administration, and my concentration would be in public policy. So I'm kind of taking everything that I learned about people to my grad school to learn how to put it into fruition and how to, manage them and manage all of that information in places like nonprofits or corporate or wherever that experience will lead me, because we don't know right now. But
nobody knows exactly the future. Sarah, no. Why did you pick international relations? It was actually my major as well in undergrad. What drew you to it?
Interesting, because at first it was just when I was a senior in high school, I knew it was sociology because my mom would always ask me, what do you want to do when you get older? And I say, well, I want to work with people. And she never really liked that answer, because to her it's like, you can do that anywhere, doing anything, let's get specific. And so my automatic, I naturally gravitated towards sociology because that's, you're learning how to manage people, you're learning about people and groups of people. But then I went to college and I started sociology, and I realized I wanted it a little more because it was coming almost too naturally, because I could, a lot of my own experiences or a lot of, I just have a lot, it was very easy for me to learn about what I was learning in sociology, and I kind of just wanted more context is what I was trying to get to, more context and a bigger picture. And so I gravitated towards international relations because now it's more things involved. And now it's more, you have a more global perspective, you have more context, you have politics now, and just a wider context of how these different dynamics affect people all over the world. And so I kind of added the two, and so far so good. I really enjoyed it.
Well, it also makes sense to me that you'd be interested in global issues. I mean, your family came from Brazil, if I understand. Can you tell us a little bit about the immigration history in your family?
Absolutely. So my mom was born in Brazil, and she came here at a very young age. She had a student visa, and she was following my grandmother who came before her. And so I grew up in that Brazilian, my whole household, that Brazilian culture, and I grew up surrounded by that. And again, a lot of my work in college, it gravitated towards what was happening in Brazil with Congress and with politics, and it was very interesting for me to get involved with American politics and relations, and go to Brazil and get involved with their politics and the way they handle things and kind of mix it together. So it's definitely been an influence on.
Yeah, you did 2 internships in Brazil in the last 2 years. Is that correct? What did they have you doing in your roles, and where were you?
Absolutely. So the first internship I did was at a nonprofit organization in Rio de Janeiro. It was in a favela. For those of you who are not familiar, it's a Brazilian slum, man-made homes on top of hills, and it has completely different culture. It's beautiful, but it has its ups and downs as well. I was working, for example, with a nonprofit and for education, and it had a lot of violence. There were, a lot of gang-related violence, a lot of military roaming the streets, and I basically, my duties there was to teach the class, to teach English lessons, and to just go anywhere where they needed me. On my first day there, they asked, "What can you do?" And I said, "Well, I go to school, I can work on computers, I know English, I can speak Portuguese as well." And so they had me working on the computers, helping with marketing, had me giving English lessons. They had me, on the soccer field working with kids. So literally anything that I knew how to do, they had me do it with this nonprofit. And it was great because I got to work with the kids and see their potential and their excitement for wanting to learn more. But at the same time, you can see the environment that they're living in despite that, mentality of wanting to move forward. And it's just, for example, the first day I taught an English lesson and there were gunshots in the background, and I'm looking at the students and they're acting like nothing's happening. And so acting calm, I need to act calm as well. So, it just shows you that dynamic, how that's their world, that's their norm, and they have their goals and everything. So it was good working with that and learning a lot from them myself. And so I did that for a month. It was really fun, really great. And then the month after that, I went to the Brazilian Congress, where it was a completely different environment. And I'm really fortunate that I got to work in the favela first before going where all the politics happened, because I kind of had that people, I had their perspective in my mind and what they needed and where society and their government needed to meet them. And then I'm now in government and I'm now in politics, where all these, where all the commissions are and the meetings with congressmen and women and the president, and they're all, where all of that is formed. And, I'm there and I'm thinking about what I learned and what needs to be said and not seeing it. So it was cool and it was upsetting in many moments. But it was an amazing time. And I was there for about a month and a half myself as well.
And does your family, are your relatives still in Brazil? Were you able to connect with people, or was this new for you?
Oh, so this was, well, I was able to stay with family, fortunately. It made cost of living very cheap because I didn't have to pay for anywhere. They were, very welcoming, and I'm grateful for that. I have many family there, all in many different states. I have family in Rio, who I stayed with them, and then I had family in Brasilia, which is where the Congress is located. I stayed with them, but as far as going into these places, nobody to hold my hand. I went in and came home, and I brought it with me at times. Fortunately, I had my family there to kind of help with Portuguese and some words that I needed to understand, some concepts and perspective that I needed to understand myself, being raised in America. I wanted to get their perspective. And so I was fortunate to have someone else there to kind of bounce off ideas and thoughts with. But yeah, I did have family there, and they were helpful to answer your question.
That's great. My husband actually was supposed to go to Brazil he was going to go in April. And so when COVID announced in March, it was canceled. You were supposed to too?
So right after graduation this May, I wanted to go. In June, I had everything saved up, and it was. I was hoping to actually go back to that nonprofit and visit them for a little bit, and COVID said otherwise. So.
Well, Sarah, when we started working together on your Suitcase Stories, was this new for you, doing storytelling?
No, absolutely. Storytelling in that way. I mean, obviously, you tell stories to friends all the time, but this was definitely a little different. This was my first experience when I volunteered that day when you went to class. I was trying to get out of my comfort zone and tell the story that I had. But that was my first time. I had experience speaking on stage. Not speaking, but acting. In freshman year, I was in a comedy sketch group with my friends just for fun. And so I was comfortable being on stage and in front of an audience in that manner, but this is a little bit different because you're trying to connect with the audience with your own personal story and with, perspectives that are more serious than what I was doing in college.
Good point.
It was different. It was very different and a lot more personal too. You're telling very personal parts of yourself, and you're sharing that with audience full of strangers. So that was certainly my first time doing something like that.
Well, what I love about your piece is you told a story. I mean, seemingly your story just starts with a story about meeting someone's parents for the first time in a relationship, right? And the cross-cultural issues that come up during this dinner. But really your story and the message and the reason we had you, invited you to be on the main stage show is about the importance of maintaining stories within families, right? And really unpacking the history of how migration affects all of our lives and carries through generations. But you said something about how you yourself weren't actually clear about your family's history. So tell me about that. Like, was your Brazilian background and culture discussed a lot? Was your grandmother's migration addressed in the family? What was that like growing up?
Absolutely. So, like I said, I was raised in the Brazilian culture, you know, food and music and everything. But when it came to the history of my grandparents and my grandmother in particular, you know, she came through Mexico, and you know, I can say that, you know, we've discussed it, you know, we're comfortable. However, um, when we're in family gatherings or when we're together when we're, you know, just amongst ourselves, it's just almost taboo, that energy. I mean, I only remember her speaking about it, that experience of coming here the first time before she got her citizenship, only once. And in that moment, it was like an awkward kind of thing in the atmosphere where we kind of moved away from it. And I remember her, she kind of, when she did mention it, I don't know, I think it was just a conversation that she, it must have been something that, you know, caused a flashback or something. She kind of mentioned it, like, that moment coming here through Mexico. She kind of cringed a little bit, and you know, we knew just, okay, taboo is just uncomfortable. And that was the only time out of all the family gatherings that we've had, is what I'm trying to say, that that it's come up. So we don't really talk about it. We don't talk about the reason, except for the fact she was coming here for asylum, and we don't talk about the details, you know. We just talk about where we are now and everything that she's doing now. And so when my story, like you said, when I was asked for the first time if did they come here legally, or, you know, in my story, it was the question that was asked: did your parents come here legally? And no one had ever asked me that question, and I didn't really know how to respond myself. You know, I still, you know, still talking about it. It's still kind of all over the place, just because it's not something that we sit down and have a conversation about to understand. And so when I was asked that question, it was, you know, very mind-boggling. It was very, I got a little, you know, I just didn't know how to.
Flustered. No,
Flustered.
of course.
Thank you. Flustered.
I can't imagine. I mean, it's hard enough meeting someone's parents, let alone having to navigate explaining your family's history.
Yes. And so, like you said, it's the point of my story was just the importance of knowing where you are, even with that being part of who you are. You know, of you know, understanding where you came from. You don't even need to know the details, but know that this is part of your story, this is who you are, but don't allow it to overshadow everything that you've done, or everything that you've, you know, achieved, everything that they themselves have achieved, you know. So that was the main.
Well, I think you talked so beautifully in your piece about the contributions and the hurdles that your family have overcome. I mean, you know, your mother went on to be a very successful director in the healthcare and care field, and then, you know, purchased a house, and then you've gone on to college. And you said that now when your grandmother, they gather together, she gets a tear in her eye because this is why she took the risk she took, right?
Exactly.
What did it feel like to tell the story? Or I know your mother was there that night. How did it feel to, I mean, you performed this in front of 850 people.
Yeah, I did. So again, you know, it felt good. It felt good at the end of it, after I had it all together, and I spoke it out to an audience, and I gained their reaction afterwards too. It was finally, it clicked. Like, you know, I myself got a better understanding of everything, everything from, you know, my history, from what I've done now, from my family, being so proud of them, being proud of my family for, you know, how far they've come, and you know, it felt really good. It was nerve-wracking and first, because again, you were with me. I had to organize these thoughts together, and I had to put it into a story where it would connect with the audience. And at the end of the day, I think it was worth it. It felt great.
What was something you learned about having to craft stories from this? If you had to, you know, mentor somebody else who's going to share theirs.
Yeah, I would say that there's a lot that you discover about yourself and about the story that you're telling in and of itself while creating and developing the story. Because I had the bits and pieces together. I had, the relationship that I was in at the time, and we talked about that, and then I talked about being asked that question whether or not they came here legally, and I had that piece, and I had kind of like the bullet points. But then in a story, you have to tell them the details, and you have to kind of bring the audience with you through the emotions that you felt at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
as you're creating that, you come across, when you actually have to sit down and think about it, think about the emotion that you felt, think about why you felt those emotions, and and just again, as you go through the story yourself, you start realizing things that you didn't realize before, because you're sitting down and actually analyzing it. You're sitting down and actually putting it in a story for others, not realizing that you're actually putting it in a story for yourself. And that's what I discovered. And I think that's important for anybody to go through, because I know a lot of stories, if you go back and watch, and they get emotional on stage, even though they've told the stories 1,000 times, because it's created in a way that you have to feel the emotion and make the audience feel the emotion every time you tell it. So I think being prepared for that is important for anyone getting involved in storytelling, as well as being prepared to learn something completely different. I went in with just telling the story. I had one idea, I thought this was the main point, and then I left saying, no, this is the main point, actually. So.
Yeah, that's how many of us approach any story. We have an idea of what we want to say, and it's not end up where we don't land, start where we land. Or land where we start, whatever. I should say that we've, if anybody's watching and wants to ask a question of Sarah about her studies or her family or culture, feel free to throw them in the chat, and we'll make sure we offer them up to her. One of the things, Sarah, I really appreciated that you demonstrated so well in your storytelling as you evolved, and certainly in the last draft, was bringing us into the internal dialogue you're having. That's like the best part for me of storytelling, to hear what the person is thinking as events are unfolding. And again, in your story, for those of you who didn't get a chance to see it, she's at a dinner table trying to impress the boyfriend's parents, and the father is suddenly pelting her with questions of like, that some of them, what are you studying? And then some of them like, tell me about your family's legal background. And what I loved is that you would tell us what was happening, show us the scene, and then pause and be like, what? And because we were thinking the same thing with you. And so that evolution of your piece just really resonated, and something that I hope other people that saw it also connected with. What did friends and family say after they saw it? Did they ask you questions you hadn't, or had conversations you hadn't had before? Were people surprised this happened to you on a date?
Well, yes, there's that. Obviously they knew that I was trying to make a good impression, and because that's how I am. I go in and I want to be ready for anything. I just want to make sure everything's perfect. And so I did have a lot of people respond to, wow, why would they ask that question, and that's so odd of them. A first date, that's not what you ask. Not first date, I'm sorry, first time meeting. There we go. I want to clarify. That's not something we ask. And then, so that's why it's so important for me to know the main point of my story, right? Because, and that's not something that was something that I figured out at the end. The end of creating the story was that, yeah, they did ask this question, sure. But I also, for me, it meant something a little bit more than it was uncomfortable. For me, because after they asked this question, they also said another important piece, which was stories are important. They're important to know. And so it was they're important to know. And so, how do I say? My main point of that story was not that it was uncomfortable to hear these questions, but that I know where I'm from, and that I'm comfortable saying it, whoever asked, to whoever who asked this question, or whatever other questions they may have. I had to think back on the stories that created me, and stories that I came from, and contributed to where I am and where my family is now. And that was the main point of my story. So when facing those questions of, wow, that's so uncomfortable, I was like, yeah, it wasn't comfortable, but it taught me a lot more. Like, that wasn't the main point. Like, I'm actually glad that happened. And so that was the main thing that I faced a lot. I had to reiterate the point of my story, which is, yes, that was uncomfortable, but don't focus on that. Focus on what I discovered about it. Yes.
No, absolutely. One of our guests wants to know your goals in the future, maybe after you graduate your master's. Do you anticipate returning to Brazil and continuing to work in that in there or here, or what? Where is your career growing? As someone might say.
Absolutely. And that's the question that I would like to myself, but of course I have my ideas. I'm just starting the program right now in my master's in public administration. And my hope is that, yes, I can bring it to Brazil at some point eventually, because I really did connect with my time there. I really learned a lot during my time there. So I'm hoping to do something with it. Again, I do hope to go back, even if it's just to go to the NGO for a few extra months to put my studies into action there. Any little thing would help. But I think in the long run, the skills that I would be learning within this program is how to manage anything from a city to a nonprofit organization to, a company. So I can take that anywhere. So if I get this master's and I want to take it to Brazil and work with that nonprofit myself and find a leadership position there or somewhere else that has similar missions and purpose, I can do that. So it's not, my goals they're not honed in yet, but I have
Uh,
I do have
that's how it's going to evolve. As I say, I actually got into storytelling and refugee work because I was planning on going to Africa. I'd gotten a job in West Africa working with refugees, and then all of a sudden 3,000 Somali migrants moved to my hometown, and everything switched because I wanted to see how our community was going to evolve through that experience. And that led me to be fascinated about the United States history with immigration and our experience being mixed communities. And and then that led me to storytelling. So you never know, Sarah. Keep everything open. But I am curious. I wish I had really seen the power of storytelling 20 years ago. When you look forward to your career or even your personal life, how do you think this storytelling experience will influence you or change? Or do you see you including storytelling in things that you do more?
I think so. Absolutely. I mean, even in that position where I was teaching the students and I had to come up with improv activities, this is something that I would, if I were to go back, I would introduce to them. Like, let's tell a story. And then we would do the workshop similar to what you did. So you have to go through the emotions. How did this make you feel? Because that led me to a lot of discoveries that have shaped my decisions moving forward in life. So who's to say that it wouldn't do the same for these younger generations, So I would definitely absolutely implement it wherever I am, even if I'm a leader somewhere in a corporate and I'm working with, employees, let's tell a story, like, how did you get here? I think news to say, just because of what it's done for me and how far I came from that experience, I think it's worth sharing it with anyone.
It's actually interesting you bring up youth, because what was unique about the partnership with Suitcase Stories and Brandeis was actually we were working with college students like yourselves to craft pieces, but you were actually also partnering with a youth organization, mentoring them on them telling stories. And so I was even surprised on my first day. I show up and there's I guess it was 15 high school students, and then another 30 of you in the college. And just watching those younger people look at you and listen to your story and see themselves in you and then want to share, it was really inspiring. And I thought it was a good way to show the power of storytelling and being intergenerational. And so I think you speaking up was very valuable to them. And I know it was very valuable to those of us in the audience. But I'm curious finally also, in terms of your future and your goals and dreams, do you think that, how do I want to say this? 20 years from now, what story might you be telling about now as it relates to COVID, or as it relates to COVID and immigration? Is there anything unique? Because I know your mother's involved. I think about Brazil and the impact on COVID in Brazil.
Crazy. We've had some family members there who have been affected, and my mom herself she's been working on the front lines with her Alzheimer's patient, and she's been doing extremely well. So I'm super proud with her on that one. But I think what I would tell personally in regards to 2020 itself, no pandemic, especially student trying to figure out what is the next move, I would say how important patience is, and how, because in a way, yes, pandemic messed up, a lot of things for many people, and in various different ways. But I think it also had its ups as well, its positive sides, and just in the way of what it showed you about communities, what it showed you about, your own household or yourself. It has humbled me personally, because it's made me reroute everything that I had planned before and start from scratch. I had all these plans listed. This is what I'm going to do during summer and moving on, and COVID erased all of that and gave me a new slate. So my story would definitely be moving forward for this year in particular about how, how to roll with the punches and how to be patient and where that can lead you, and what, and what I've learned from all of that. That's a whole different.
No, I think that's a good theme. We talk about in storytelling the powers of themes. So this idea of patience and perspective is,
yes.
Oh gosh, I almost said powerful, and then I was going to be all kinds of alliteration. Sarah, is Northeastern going, do you know yet? Are you going to be on campus or virtual, or what's the model going to look like?
So I just went for online myself so that I can balance a full-time job with being a full-time student. So I figured being online would help with that. So because everything is for that particular program, and I believe that they also have the option of being on campus, but I personally chose to do it online for the time being.
You're going to be online full-time and full-time working. Is that what you just said? You're doing both simultaneously full-time? Oh, sorry. That's impressive. I think I just lost your audio.
Oh, you're cutting off a little bit. Can you see me okay?
Now I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, that's what I said.
So I'll just repeat. So you're working full-time and you're going to school full-time. Yes. When are you going to have time to tell stories, Sarah? That is amazing, and sounds very much the tenacity of your parents, your grandmother, your mother. It seems intergenerational to go above and beyond. Well, I'm just going to say that working with you on your story last year was such a privilege. We'll post the story so people can listen to it. It is so remarkable and so unique. And I just want to thank you, and I want to wish you the absolute best. Last year, every year actually, at the International Institute, we honor an immigrant who has made a tremendous impact in their field. And the hearing that you're going to Northeastern means a lot to us, because last year we honored the Golden Door Award. We gave it to Joseph Ayoun, who is the president of Northeastern. And we had the big gala when we were able to get together at Northeastern. And it was such a powerful event. And he spoke about the potential of students and the importance of actually bringing to attention these immigrant stories. So Sarah, you are well suited and in good company there at the college. And we hope you stay in touch with us and see how your career evolves and where you literally go.
Thank you. I'm excited to also see where this leads. And I will be back, of course.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you everybody for spending your lunch with us. Again, my name is Cheryl Hamilton. I'm the director of Suitcase Stories. We have these virtual conversations every Wednesday at noon. Next week, we're actually having Ramatullah Aka, who is our manager of community services at the International Institute of New England. He came to the United States from Afghanistan on a special visa for his work in Afghanistan as a lawyer and human rights advocate. And so you can hear what he did in his country, as well as the new life he's building here and the work he does on behalf of our clients, the International Institute. If you want to hear more about Suitcase Stories, you can go to suitcasestories.org, where you can even subscribe to become a Circle member, where you get access to behind the scenes videos and resources and invitations to special events. And you can do that again at suitcasestories.org. But for now, have a fantastic afternoon. It's a little bit cooler out today, but the sun is shining. So hopefully you can at least take a walk as we all try to continue social distancing. Have a great afternoon, everybody.